So tonight is a special night. We're going to begin a new series that will, Bezrat Hashem, last for several months. The name of the series is Challenges, Struggles, and Trials of the 21st Century. This is a very, very challenging time to be living in. Our forefathers, the previous generations, had to contend with other difficulties. Life was more primitive once upon a time. We may be more advanced, we have the technology. However, you'll be surprised, people today are not necessarily as happy as they used to be. So some of the topics that we'll be discussing in the next couple of weeks are how to deal with adversity and depression. People are going through all kinds of troubles, including depression. A lot of medication is being prescribed for all kinds of ailments. We'll be talking about unfulfilled expectations in marriage. For some reason, marriage is not what it used to be. And we need to try to figure out why and what we can do about it. Reconciling Torah truths with science, since science has become a very powerful group, and there's a lot of advances in science and technology. Sometimes it presents a problem to Jews who believe in God in trying to figure out, wait a minute, the Torah says one thing and science says something else. How do we reconcile between the two? Can they really be peaceful harmony between the two? Can the two coexist? And the truth is that not always. Sometimes yes, but not always. And this is an area that has to be addressed in order that people should not have any misunderstandings as to what our faith says and what science is trying to preach. And another area is combating extravagance, immorality, and the emptiness of secular materialism. This is a very materialistic society, and not only here in the United States, but all over the world, we see that there is a great emphasis on materialism. We have greater comforts, we have the means to acquire those comforts, but that has led to a certain emptiness. Some people have discovered that emptiness, realize that life is not only about materialism and about getting your latest car. Some people have realized that that's not necessarily what's going to make them happy. Others have yet to discover it. In the meantime, there's a lot of confusion. On the one hand, you have all this comfort, you have all these goodies, and there's a lot of money to be made. But for some reason, people are not happy. So we have to understand what's wrong, what's going on, and how to deal with it properly. So today is going to be more of an introduction into this topic. We need to understand that all these troubles that we are witnessing, that we are experiencing in our generation, has already been predicted in the past by our prophets, by our sages in the Talmud. They mentioned it. They said that if you're going to be around during this time, this is what you will experience. And the first question that comes to mind is, why tell people the bad news? You know, it's bad enough when we have to live with it, live through it. Why tell us in advance that this is going to happen? And the answer is very simple. If we know about it in advance and we actually are facing it, it will be easier for us to deal with. In other words, it will help us in a sense that we will know that this was already predicted, that this was coming, and hopefully this is only temporary. Why is it temporary? Because the Torah, in the very beginning, the Torah already reveals to us God's creation, how the system works. The system works Vayhi Erev Vayhi Voker. If you read the first chapter in Bereshit, in Genesis, you will see that the way you count the day is first comes night, then comes day. That is how the Jewish calendar works. The day begins at night, then follows the day. Whereas in other calendars or in other cultures, it's the day that ends with the night. The Torah says God created the world first with a night and then with a day. What's the purpose? Why do it that way? Because nighttime represents kochot hara, kochot hatumah. It represents the powers of impurity. It represents difficulties. Impurities is something that not everybody understands. What's impurities? When one discusses witchcraft, right? When one reads up on all these demonic forces, one is introduced to the impure world or to the impure forces. It's much broader than that. I just gave you a few examples. Witchcraft and demons, these all belong to a certain camp. Let's just call it the camp of the impure forces, or as it's called in the Kabbalah, the Sitra Achara, the other side. The night belongs to them. They dominate or rule during that time of the day called night. And that is why one of the reasons we wash our hands when we wake up is because the night produces a certain impurity on our extremities. Extremities meaning the fingers. So we wash our hands in the morning. Because we were asleep, then we were somewhat dead, in a sense. Sleep, as the rabbis tell us, is 1/60th of death. You feel a certain level or degree of death. And that brings impurity to the human body, a very light level of impurity. So the nighttime is representative of those impurities. It's representative of difficulties. Whereas daytime is representative of the light of God, the abundance of God. Two total opposites. They're very, very different. Night is very different than day. This world, Olam Hazeh, what we're living through almost for 6,000 years, has had a lot of darkness. And this darkness conceals the light of Hashem. We don't see God. I mean, occasionally we see a miracle. Occasionally we see a ray of light. But in the meantime, where is God? Where was he in the Holocaust? How come there's so much trouble? How come there's so much war? How come there's so much misery? That's all darkness. It's obscure. God conceals himself. So difficult times are represented by darkness. Darkness will come first in creation, leading up to light. The revelation of God with the coming of Mashiach is called day. That's called daylight. And guess what? As we get closer to the day, you will see the rays of the day. It's not that there's day and there's night and all of a sudden there's day. Little by little, the light begins to shine. Little by little, the sun rises. And little by little, we will see, if you pay attention, that the signs are out there, that the day is about to arrive. So, in the meantime, during all this darkness, we have a lot of war. What's all this war about? As I've explained in another lecture, Milchamot HaOlam, especially world wars, and especially Gog Magog, the last and final wars, is really representative of the battle, the constant battle, continuous battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. There's a continuous battle, and guess what? That battle is within ourselves too. Every human being has a constant battle with his evil inclination. There's something that tells him to do the right thing, that instructs him to do the will of God, and that is because he has a soul. We all have a soul, which is divine. And the soul is pure. It wants to do the right thing. We're here for a good reason. To contribute something to this beautiful world. Otherwise, what's the purpose of life? But in order to enable us to have 100% free will, God has to conceal himself, and he has to make it a little bit of a struggle. A struggle or a battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. Between truth and falsehood. Evil inclination and the positive, good inclination. So this continuous inner struggle is also seen outwardly. Wars between nations. For similar things. You know, sometimes you analyze two countries who are fighting, and it's so childish. What are they fighting for? For a few more miles? You have enough. What do you want more? No, it's mine. Exact same arguments that little children have. They're just older in age, but not in brains. But why is it so? Well, God created human beings who have, unfortunately, this inner struggle that sometimes is expressed outwardly in a major battle with bombs and missiles and even nuclear bombs, God forbid. Gog and Magog, however, the last major battles, the last world wars of which we have already had, World War I and World War II, represent the last. It is the last wars. And in the meantime, what you have right now is really a mixture of good and bad everywhere. They're not so separate. They're not really apart. Otherwise, people would be able to choose sides easily. Oh, I belong to this side and I belong to that side. You know, during World War I and World War II, you have the Axis powers, you have the Allies. You had two sides. Interesting, isn't it? It wasn't just one nation against many. It was two sides. Why have two sides? Apparently, there's two very different philosophies. I'm not going to say who's right and who's wrong right now, because everything is mixed up today. Even within good, even within the good camp, the ones who fight for liberty and for peace and for the right things, even amongst them, there's a mixture, there's an irbuvia of bad. There's no pure good. There is something called very high concentration of bad, and that's called Amalek. Amalek, which is there's a separate lecture about that, represents the epitome of evil. He is the ambassador of evil. That's where there's the greatest concentration of evil. Other than Amalek, the world is really a mixture of good and bad everywhere. Because the human being in himself, unless he's become an angel, unless he's worked on himself to become a righteous individual, he always has a little bit of the two. That's what repentance is all about. We make mistakes. And we repent. We say, I'm sorry, whether it's at home with one's spouse or whether it's with God. We sometimes, stumble. But that's human. We are told that when we go upstairs, they won't accuse us of making a mistake. They'll blame us for not trying to fix it. You stumbled, why didn't you get up? Pick yourself up and fix and clean up your mess. For that, there's no excuse. The fact that you stumbled, we can understand that. People stumble, people make mistakes. That's human nature. But why don't you try to correct it and deal with it properly? So today, even those who have a lot of good in them will suffer. Will have some experience, negative experience, because within their good, within their goodness, there is something that is not so good, something that is not so pure. However, since our generation is right before the end, right before Mashiach comes, we are told to expect a filtering process, which I've also spoken about. Sinun, as it's called in Hebrew, Sinun hara mi'atov, the filtering process of removing all evil from good, is something that will happen gradually. Because what are we facing now? We're facing the end. The end is coming, it's fast approaching. And what does the end represent? The end represents tikkun haolam, when God fixes the world. He brings us to its final perfection, which should have been done a long time ago. Had the Jewish nation done its job properly, and they would have been a light unto the nations, then of course things would have been better. But that did not happen. So it does happen when Mashiach comes. That's what Mashiach represents. It's the finale. And in the finale, the truth is revealed. All of a sudden, light, no darkness, and everybody will see the truth. In order to get there, you have to remove the evil. Evil is being removed little by little. There's a struggle, a very difficult struggle towards the end between the good and the evil. And that struggle is there because God is about to remove the evil completely. And guess what? Evil senses that. Evil senses that its time is coming. And it therefore puts up a big fight. And therefore, what we are supposed to be expecting, like our rabbis told us, is a very big fight between right and wrong, between the forces of good and evil, much more than during the time of Genghis Khan. We've had trouble in the past. We've had barbaric nations. We've had evil. But to the point of nuclear war, where millions of people can die, God forbid. What we have today is the ability to, God forbid, bring about tremendous destruction. Because evil is powerful. A nuclear bomb, even though nuclear energy is good, but a nuclear bomb is taking all that power that lies in nuclear energy and using it for the wrong reasons. Power is there. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of ways of doing good, but people can take all that and do the wrong things with it. Imagine if the whole world was united in doing the right thing, doing the same thing. It would be a different kind of world. So towards the end, we have a major confrontation between the good and the evil, and this is all in preparation to filter out all that evil. What's interesting, however, that during this process, it is brought down in the Zohar and in other Kabbalistic books, that as God begins to filter out the evil from the bad, the evil from the good, He will bring back in reincarnation many, many souls that have lived in the past that were evil. The souls of the generation of Sdom ve'Amorah. And if you read the Torah, you know what happened to the people who lived in that area, in that region. God overturned that whole area because they were evil. He will bring them back. He will bring back the souls from the generation of the flood. They were evil too. Why bring them back? Now we know what reincarnation is. For the most part, reincarnation is a tikkun. It's a rectification for the soul itself. But these are evil souls. Why bring it now?
Get the punishment.
Why bring them now? Bring them in the past. If you want to rectify them, if that's the sole reason of bringing them, to rectify them, God had many opportunities to bring them. There are souls that have come back in a reincarnation many times to rectify. But not all reincarnations are for a rectification. At least not for the soul itself. Sometimes a reincarnation is the punishment itself. Is to bring back the soul that was evil once upon a time. And this is the final episode in the rectification for the world. God is about justice. God is about balancing the books. When I say balancing the books, I mean that there's an attribute of justice. There's an attribute of mercy and compassion too. But there's din, there's justice. Justice has to be carried out for things to be fair. They may not be fair at first, but at some point later on, they need to be accounted for. Either they're accounted for upstairs, or they're accounted for somehow during one's life through pain and suffering, what we call atonement, or they're accounted for in a future reincarnation. The rectification, therefore, in bringing these souls again into the world is for purposes of the world. The world needs to be rectified. Rectified meaning eliminating evil, cleansing the world of this evil. Let the world see these individuals that represented evil in the past and represent evil in this lifetime as well. They're going to be gone. We're filtering them out, we're removing them. And you're going to see it with your own eyes so that you will understand that crime doesn't pay, as they say in English. In other words, that in the end, evil does not pay. Up until now, people are confused. Why is this guy who's evil getting away with it? Yes, right now it appears to be that way. In the end, as we get closer to the revelation of the truth, and evil is being filtered out, we're actually going to see that evil does not win. Evil loses. Bringing back those souls that in the past perpetrated so much evil and brought into this world so much contamination. We need to cleanse this world. Those same guys come back. And if they behave the same way, they have free will. They don't have to behave in the same way they did it. But if they continue their evil ways, then they're going to suffer the consequences when the light begins to shine. So that's one reason for bringing them. The second reason, as I began to explain, is for us to see that evil is going to pay for its crimes. Evil is going to pay for the sins it committed. That there is justice in the world. That God does judge those who commit evil. And of course, there's always the possibility that some individuals who did commit the wrongs in the past will be given a last chance to do teshuvah, to repent, to correct their mistakes. And why do I say last chance? Because right before Mashiach comes, it is the last chance. Once the truth is revealed, you cannot repent. You cannot say, yes, I accept, I believe. In a way, it's too late. Free will not really be completely free will. When God says, you see, I'm here, I was always around. Why didn't you follow me? Why didn't you do what I said that you should do? At that point, free will is, you can't really say it's free will. It's so obvious, it's so clear what the truth is. Therefore, we will not be rewarded for doing the right thing because it will be almost automatic. So therefore, right before the curtain comes up and we are introduced to the truth, this will be the last chance for people really to make amends to their deeds, for their past mistakes. One of the questions that I have and others have had too about this generation of Mashiach, where there's so much confusion and so many struggles and hardships, is what good can come out from a Yeridat Hadorot? Yeridat Hadorot is what the rabbis call a deterioration, the fall, the decadence of the generation. It's coming down spiritually compared to those that lived before. What good can come out of this? I mean, why would God allow this to happen? It's one thing that there is war. Okay, that's people's choice. And even that, for some reason, God allows. He doesn't get always involved. He doesn't interfere. He lets them fight. Okay, there's a reason for that. But for people to really have to struggle, for people spiritually, really have to do battle with their evil inclination in a way that they didn't have to in the past. In the past, we had this internal battle with the evil inclination, but now things are going to get tougher. What would be the benefit of making life more difficult for the individual that he has to really now, more than ever, overcome so much temptation? That's what this series is all about. There's so many challenges, there's so many struggles today that did not exist in the past. Why bring them now? Why make it more difficult now? And the answer is as follows. The weaker the generation is spiritually, which it is today, the more you have Yeridat Hadorot, the greater the sanctification of God's name will be, the greater the Kiddush Hashem. What that means is that if anybody does any minor good deed, this minor good deed, it's small, counts a lot more than it did in the past. So any minor thing, any minor good deed that people will do in this weak generation is much more significant than if it was done in the past. When they were righteous, they had other struggles, they had other challenges, but now that it's so tough, and despite it being so difficult, comes along this human being who has free will and can do the right or the wrong thing, chooses to do the right thing, even though it's minor. Imagine walking an old lady across the street. It's a minor thing to do. It doesn't take that much of your time and that much effort. But you know that this matters a lot more today than it did in the past. Why? Why would it matter now more than the past? Think about it for a second. Why would it make such a difference? Why would this be admirable much more than in the past?
In the past, the people would do it, but now people, they are so busy in their own life, they don't care for it.
Today, people are so indifferent, so callous. They don't have the time. They don't care. They're more into themselves. Since that is the mentality all over the world, whether you live in the North Pole or it makes no difference where you live. I mean, countries, of course, have different mentalities and people are different everywhere. But still, the world is a small place. It's a small community today. And it's not the same of what it was in the past.
People live in big cities, it's different than...
In the big cities, of course, different than the small cities. Of course, there's still going to be differences. But generally speaking, a small good deed today will matter a lot more. Bashamayim, in heaven, when they look down at this individual, they'll say, wow, so nice of you. So courageous of you to do this. Even though everybody else couldn't care less, they just ignored that person that fell and hurt himself, and you went over and picked him up. You went over and gave him a hand. You stopped because he had a flat tire and nobody else was stopping. I mean, these things matter a lot. That is how we get merits. And today, even something that's minor counts a lot because it's much more difficult. So if you're wondering why does God do it, why does he make it more difficult and challenging, is because now he wants the truth to come out. He wants to refine, what did we say before? Refine or filter out the evil from the good. And therefore, in order to refine it, difficulties present themselves. It's challenging. It's tough. And when it's tough, you really see who your true friends are indeed, right? Who really cares? It's tough. And therefore, even the minor deeds will count because they will be indicative of an individual who wants to do the right thing, who wants to do the good thing. We have a tradition that even though that is God's plan, to bring out as much good as possible and to separate once and for all the evil from good, for one to actually make the choice of believing in God and doing the right thing, it will be so difficult, they say, as to climb a wall. I don't think most of you can climb a wall, right? Just a flat wall, a smooth wall, smooth surface. That's very difficult. They gave us that description because they meant to impress upon us how difficult it will be indeed to fight the trend. And to believe, just to believe in God, and to do the right thing, it will be very, very difficult. And the question is, why so difficult? I mean, there is proof that God exists. And for those who don't have the proof, or weren't raised with it, you know, you can read about it and you can convince yourself. I mean, we're somewhat intelligent. I mean, we have the ability, we have the mental faculties to digest information and to make decisions. So where lies the difficulty? I just said something that really may give the impression that there's some blockage. Faith will be so difficult as to climb up a wall. I mean, faith to believe? Why? I mean, a lot of people believe. A lot of people don't believe. A lot of people struggle with belief, with faith in God. But where lies the difficulty? Why now is it more difficult than in the past? Remember the tree of knowledge in Bereshit? You know, somehow, you know, it was forbidden to eat from without God's permission. Eventually, God would have given them permission to eat from it. But he says, not now. Why not? Why hold us back from it? What's wrong with knowledge? Knowledge can be dangerous too. Where's the danger? Just pay attention to what the Nachash, the serpent, says. V'yitem kelokim. You know, if you eat from it, you will be like God. What does that mean? You will be like God. What it really means is that you will be independent of God. You won't need him. That's what it really means. That's really the underlying message over here. You won't feel a need for him. You'll be so independent. You'll be so knowledgeable. You'll know it all. Today, with all this knowledge, with all this science, they have tasted, the generation has tasted a little bit of this tree of knowledge. And they feel they know it all. Or at least they feel that they don't need a God. He's not really missing in their life. And what really happens is that as a result of this vacuum of sorts, of no God, you have many, many cults that have sprung up. That's interesting. There's a vacuum, that means they removed God, science removed God. All of a sudden there's cults springing up everywhere. Because of the same reason. When you remove God, what are you saying? What you're saying is what many secular Jews, unfortunately, attempt to say. Kol echad v'haemet shelo. Let everybody live according to their truth. Oh, you mean there's more than one truth? There can only be one truth. No. Kol echad v'haemet shelo. It's impossible that there should be more than one truth. Truth means truth. There's nothing else. No, but when you remove God, that's what you begin to believe. That you can believe in whatever you want. So you have all these cults trying to fill in, their way of understanding life and how to become happy and how to live a good life. And religion after religion has tried to give their flavor as to what life is all about and how you can find bliss in paradise if you do this or that. In other words, removing God introduced other attempts to bring different forms, different deities, different religion, different beliefs in trying to reproduce what really should have been something accepted to all, that there's only one God. So that is why you have so many cults trying to reproduce the authentic one truth, one God. This is all part of the confusion, part of the darkness, part of what we're all experiencing now more than ever. The bottom line is, people will live by a motto that there's no absolute truth. And if you don't have an absolute truth, as I've explained before, that leads to war. That leads to Democrats and Republicans. Why can't they all believe the same thing? Didn't you once ask yourself, why do you have to have so many parties? There's no absolute truth. The fathers of the Constitution more or less agreed on the same things. And they definitely would be very upset if they got up today and saw what was going on. This is not what they had in mind. Obviously what's going on here and what's influencing the politics of many, many countries, or all nations, is personal agendas, not the truth. But those personal agendas are being called truths as well, because there's no absolute truth. So why can't his personal interest be valid and be accepted? How could you tell him you're wrong? That's not the right thing to do. Who says there's a right and wrong? There's no absolute truth. See what I mean? So in the very, very beginning, when the fathers of the Constitution, the fathers of this country, who were more into belief in God, some things were easier to accept. They still had their differences. People are different. People are entitled to have different opinions. That's okay. That's welcome. But it definitely helps when there's an absolute truth. You have less differences, less problems. So what's the way to deal with all these difficulties, with this lack of absolute truth, with this indifference towards religion? How do we deal with it? Because all of this, remember, is influencing every one of us, whether we like it or not. It's out there. There's a war out there. It's a spiritual war. And the rabbis tell us the way to wage a spiritual war is with chutzpah. Now, chutzpah doesn't sound like a good word. Chutzpah means impudence. But the rabbis tell us, listen, that's the ammunition of the sitra achara. Remember the sitra achara that I mentioned earlier? The other camp, the impure forces, they're going to be fighting you with a lot of chutzpah. They're going to wage a very, very aggressive war that knows no boundaries, the only way you can do war with them is with chutzpah. What kind of chutzpah? Spiritual chutzpah. You have to emphasize goodness. You have to be kind and generous more than the average. You have to involve yourself in positive things. Otherwise, you'll be swept away with them. You have to fight them. You have to fight them with the opposite of what they're doing. They're trying to emphasize materialism and selfishness. You owe it to yourself. They call me up from time to time, "Sir, you owe yourself a vacation." I said, "Since when do you know that I owe myself a vacation? I just had one a couple months ago." "No, you owe yourself another one. Go on this cruise. Go spend some more money. You don't have it, borrow it on credit cards. It's okay, you know." They're trying to convince you of something you don't really necessarily need. Materialism, comforts. This is not the holy camp. This is not spirituality. This is not what the purpose of life is for. But it's all about distraction. This is a very powerful camp, the camp of the impure forces. Now, I'm not trying to make fun of all of this because human beings are physical too. And we need to rest. And we want to have a good time. We enjoy music and good food. Yes, as long as you don't overdo it, and it's okay. The problem is that this camp overdoes it. That's all it believes in. There is no spirituality. Oh, leave that out. You don't need that. Why don't you read a novel? A novel? What's a novel? A novel is an escape from reality. It never happened. It's the figment of the imagination of some author. Now, I'm not saying a novel is bad. It could be something beautiful, especially if it's based on real facts. The problem is there's so much true information out there to learn, to read, and life is short, then why waste it on a novel? I can't understand it. You want to improve your vocabulary? You want to learn about, literature? There's a lot of true literature. Literary work. Why read something that was invented? In other words, as far as the story, where there's a lot of true stories that could be inspiring. Life is short. Why waste it? This is a waste. Unless it really helps you in some way. And usually it's all it is an escape. It's too difficult to read something that is informative, that can perhaps lead you to become a better person. That requires a lot of work and effort. It's hard. So people are lazy. They want to do what's easy. So if you want to fight the battle against the evil inclination, you have to use chutzpah. And chutzpah, spiritually speaking, is doing the opposite of what the evil inclination is telling you to do. Do the right thing. Go out of your way and help somebody. Be more charitable. Be kind. Right? All of these things we take for granted. Yes, of course it's important to be kind. No. But now you have to, more than ever, be extra careful to be kind and sensitive to people. Not because people need it, but you need it. You need it for yourself. As the rabbis tell us, when we perform deeds that help others, we're helping ourselves too. We're becoming kinder and more sensitive by being kinder and sensitive to others. Our nature is changing. We're becoming better people. And the world will become a better place as a result of our deeds. We have to, therefore, disseminate all this light, this positive light, through our good deeds. And this way, we're able to defeat the evil forces. Even though this is obvious, this makes sense to a lot of us nonetheless have difficulty with it because we don't always remember that challenges are to our benefit. When we see a challenge, we say, "Oh, why is this coming to me? Why do I have to go through this?" Don't think like that. Don't be negative about it. When you're facing a challenge, remember, any challenge, whether it's an illness or economic difficulties or difficulties with a neighbor or a lawsuit or some other problem, God forbid, this challenge is beneficial. Something good will come from it. A challenge, as the rabbis tell us, a nisayon is from the lashon nes, to elevate us. God does not test us to see something about ourselves. He knows what's going on in our minds and heart. He doesn't have to test us to find out something. We test others because we don't know what they're up to. When God tests or puts us through a trial, it's for us to find out where we're holding. Oh, I didn't know I was capable of doing this. Now I know. You see? It was good for you that you went through this hardship. You've become a stronger individual as a result of this difficulty. Now you may help others who have a similar problem. There could be all kinds of reasons why people have to experience something, but the common denominator is always, it's to our benefit. If we know this, it's helpful. As I said earlier, if we know that we're going to be expecting difficult times, it will help us. Oh, the rabbis already spoke about it. The prophets described this, that this is going to happen. Oh, it's good that I know it in advance, because I'm going to prepare myself. So it's not only the knowledge that this is going to happen, it's also realizing and remembering it's also to our benefit. We're going to gain something out of it. We're actually going to gain something by being around during these days. Why us? And not our grandparents. There's some reason why our soul came down now to be around at this time. For some reason. We are the ones that need to be around. The greatest, therefore, and most difficult and challenging war of all is the internal war, the spiritual war, not the physical war that's out there with missiles and guns. Yes, you have to be creative, you have to have strategy. Nobody denies that, but the more difficult one, the one that's constant, is the internal. Why is it so difficult? Because even if you win, it's going to come back tomorrow. It's never going to let go. See, when you defeat the enemy and you do a good job, that enemy may not come back so quickly. He may even give up. But not the internal enemy, the evil inclination who's with us from the moment we're born till the day we die. He doesn't give up. That's his job. You won today, he might come back tomorrow. And he comes with a different disguise. And sometimes we forget that it's him. That's why it's so difficult. That's why a lot of people stumble. They don't realize that this enemy is out to get them. So this is the most difficult war of all. Milchemet HaNefesh, as I call it. The war with one's own spirit, with one's own evil inclination. The spiritual war. You can have a lot of people who are righteous and good people who will stumble. And it's a shame. It's embarrassing. I've had many people call me up and complain, how is it possible that this rabbi committed this terrible sin? Did you read about it? It's all over the place. I tell them, wait a minute. I didn't know rabbis don't have an evil inclination. We're all human. We all have challenges. We make mistakes. He stumbled. Feel bad for him. In order not to stumble, you need a tremendous dose of Yirat Shamayim, the fear of heaven. Tremendous, large dose of fear of heaven, which will hold us back and make sure that we evaluate something before we do it. Most people don't evaluate. They rush into it. They don't think enough about it. That is why they make a mistake. Think twice, think 100 times before you do anything that is questionable. How many people think? This is not a generation that too many people think. And you can have somebody who's really otherwise a good person because he did not think and he acted impetuously or impulsively. He made a mistake. A very healthy dose of fear of heaven is important. One develops his fear of heaven, it will help him throughout his life. Because of this lack of fear of heaven in today's generation, many machsomim, many, I guess we can call it in English, barriers. Many barriers that should be up have been torn down. What's a barrier that has been torn down? Well, one of the barriers is the barriers of modesty. Tzniut, as it's called in Hebrew. Do you know that bathing suits in the 1950s were more modest than today? Women bathing suits. For those of you who remember, they covered most of the body. What happened? Is it just that somebody in Paris decided that there's a new style? Remove everything and just leave a couple strings? What happened? There used to be a barrier. A barrier means that people were actually a little bit shy, embarrassed to show more of their skin. People understood that you don't walk around in public showing off your body. I mean, there were always people who did the wrong thing. I mean, prostitution has been around for forever, but it was more hidden. Today, if you go on the street, it's terrible what you see. So what happened? One of those barriers that is supposed to be up has been torn down. As a result of tearing down the barrier, guess what happens? Which part of our body has become a victim? The eyes. And the eyes have a barrier. And what is the barrier of the eyes? The eyelids. In other words, if you see something wrong, close your eyes. But that's much more easily said than done. Can you walk around closing your eyes every second? You're going to run into a tree. So some people, you know what they do? They wear dark sunglasses. So they shouldn't have to see all that detail in color out there. But most people actually are actually looking and enjoying what they're seeing. And that's not enough. They see it on their TVs, they see it on the internet. Many of those barriers that used to exist in the past is easily accessible now. In other words, that stuff that was blocked is accessible. And that's contaminating the eyes. And when the eyes are contaminated, it leads to all kinds of trouble in the family. All kinds of troubles, which we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks. In today's generation, as a result of the standard of living going up, ta'avot have become stronger. Ta'avot means desires. More food, better foods, all kinds of pleasures that people could not afford in the past. Today they're more affordable or accessible. And desires, if they're overdone, can easily trigger sin. Easily. Ta'avot. Torah warns us about it. Be very, very careful. Lo lachmod, not to desire, to covet. Especially forbidden things. But if it's free, people are tempted. Remember, human beings are frail. They're weak. And if you tempt them and you give it to them for free, they're going to come. How many companies out there tempt you with something for free so you should come and hear their sales pitch? They want to sell you some, what do you call those vacations? Timeshare? Just come for 45 minutes and listen to what we have to say, and we're going to give you a gift. And what do you have to do to get there? You have to travel 2 hours. You're going to lose 2 hours traveling there, 2 hours come back, and perhaps another 45 minutes or an hour staying there. And they promise you a gift. Sometimes that gift is very tempting. 2 nights for free at some very fancy hotel, but there's all these blackout dates, so you rarely get to enjoy it. Or you finally come and you're looking forward to the gift, and they give you some cheap camera that is disposable. You know, they didn't tell you what they were going to give you. They were luring you. So people fall for it. Why do you think there's billions of dollars, I believe billions, not millions, dollars being spent on advertisement? Because it seems to work. For some people. I say some, even though it's probably most. Advertisement. If you buy this, you'll be so happy you did. How do you know? Anyway, a lot of money is being spent because human beings are susceptible to, easily susceptible to being tempted and being influenced by all these things that speak to their, to their fancies. So many barriers have been broken down. Who is adding oil or gasoline to the fire? Who's making it worse? mass communication. Newspapers, radio, all of this is mass communication. That means it's reaching out to all the corners of the world. So that is why everybody's being affected by it. You can't insulate yourself so easily. Mass communication. And many of them have a liberal agenda, and people are being affected by it. The reason why people are affected is because people absorb from the environment, from what they read. And this is not a new theory. I mean, it's a well-known fact that the environment is very powerful. Many people basically do what the neighbor does. People's accent changes when they live in a certain place. Their habits change as a result of being exposed to certain things. That's how it is. Human beings are easily affected. But you know what's the most dangerous type of influence? Brainwashing. You have, at least in the past, in Russia, they actually brainwashed the Communist Party kids to snitch on their parents. I could never understand how that was possible for a child to snitch on his parent, that my father is doing something against the law. He's religious, he's praying, or whatever it is that got his parents into trouble. How could a child do this? Because of Mother Russia. Again, this was a problem in the past. Today, things are different in Russia. But there were times in Russia, in the past, where being religious or being observant, as a Jew especially, was limited and severely punished if somebody went against the law. So for the kid to tell on his parent, that's how far the brainwashing went? That the country was more important than your own parent? That they take precedent over your own parent? That just comes to prove to you. I mean, it easily can be seen how people are susceptible, how you can actually brainwash them. So now we begin to understand why in this kind of an atmosphere of confusion, of the evil and the good mixing, without having a clear distinction between the two, when the forces of evil and good are fighting each other, and when things are so more difficult today than in the past, we begin to understand why happiness is not something to be seen, to be found so easily. As in the past, people were happier with less. Today they have more, they're not happy. Why? Because what they've achieved today, as in Hollywood, is ta'avot. They got their hands on desires. Finally, money bought them what they want, but the money didn't bring them happiness. So movie stars, they become wealthy. They have everything they ever dreamt of. Why are they getting divorced? Why are they going into drugs? Because they have not found happiness. They have found their desires. True happiness is something spiritual. You won't find it in all the vanities of life, in materialism. And if you do find something that makes you happy, it's temporary. It won't last. It's empty. And that is why. This happiness is really not to be seen. It's something not so common these days. You find very few people who are truly happy. But they're good people, they're righteous. Why can't they be happy? Because, as we said before, even the good people have some bad mixed into them. And when I say bad, I don't mean evil. When I say bad, I mean something negative, something that belongs to the other camp. The pursuit of all these pleasures, a materialistic lifestyle. So you may be a good person, a righteous individual, you're honest, you pay your taxes, you're a good person. Why can't you be happy? Perhaps because you have all this materialism and you're pursuing some, not all, some of what this other camp is trying to sell you. You really want to be happy, you have to put more emphasis on that which brings happiness, and that is a spiritual lifestyle, a life of spirituality, a stronger connection to God, in realizing what's important, what's a priority, and what's not. If you overemphasize that which is materialism, that which is vain, at some point it's going to be empty and you're going to feel it. So you have good people because they have a mixture in themselves, because they've been influenced from the environment, of all these other things that are not spiritual, That is why happiness will even escape them. And even good families and good couples will end up, God forbid, divorcing. They don't have the tolerance, the patience to live with each other anymore. What happened to all that patience? People had trouble in the past. Men and women couldn't get along in the past too. The differences always existed, but at least in the past they lived with it. They accepted it. They were patient about it. Said, okay. You know, they wouldn't want to get divorced. At least they appreciated, this is the woman who raises my children. At least they saw some of the goodness in her. Today people don't have the patience. They treat everything like paper plates, disposable. They want instantaneous happiness, gratification. Where is that coming from? Not from the Bible, not from the Torah. It's coming from the media. So you see how people are becoming contaminated, and therefore they have to deal with this struggle. They're exposed to it. Okay, so what do we do? What do we do about this? Today is just the introduction. This lecture is just the introduction into the challenges, the various struggles that people have in this century that we'll be talking about in the coming weeks and months. So for the time being, what should we do about it? You know, what can we do that is easy? You know, I said before it's not easy, but what can we do, or where can we begin? Number one, it's not a secret. The rabbis remind us that one should constantly pray every day, and it's in our prayer books. Shetatzilenu miyetzer hara. The rabbis put it there for some reason, you know, for good reason. Because the evil inclination attacks every day in all kinds of ways. Pray. Ask for God's assistance. Every day. Very important. Now, it doesn't just mean that because you ask, you will be helped. When you ask for it, you are reminded yourself that you need God's help. It helps you focus. Prayer, very, very important. We have to believe that we have the means or the ability to make a difference in life. Some people think that, what's my vote? It's not going to count anyway. Every vote, as we're told, counts, right? But people sometimes say, my vote really won't matter anyway. We have to believe, every human being has to believe that his actions can make a difference somewhere. A kind word. You helped someone in their time of need. Anything, it may make a difference. It can make a difference. Don't underestimate yourself. Don't give up. Even minor deed can make a difference. Number three, we have to believe, and we have to constantly keep in mind that Hashem, God, is so happy with every small deed. He's actually happy about it. Zeoselo nachat ruach. It brings happiness to the Almighty. Sometimes people say, this doesn't really make that much of a difference. God doesn't pay attention. No, we have to remember everything we did actually matters a lot to Him. It makes Him happy. And today, more than ever, every minor deed is even more important than it was in the past. Rabbis tell us in Pirkei Avot, and I like to always bring this up over and over again, because sometimes people are dissuaded from doing anything good or progressing because they think that they are Rasha'im. I'm a bad person as it is, they say. How do you expect me, or why should I do this good deed? It's incompatible with what I do a whole day. So wait a minute. Don't you realize that this is advice from your evil inclination? He's telling you you're an evil man. Rabbi says, Al tehi rasha bifnei atzmecha. Don't consider yourself an evil man. Well, a lost case. That's what some people say. I'm a lost case anyway. Forget it. That's it. I've already done so many terrible things. There's no cure. Don't think like that. Everything you do counts. Is worth it. Yes, you may not be perfect, but do whatever you can. Rabbi tells, they warn us. Don't consider yourself a wicked man, because otherwise you won't do anything. You won't try to do anything. Therefore, the rabbis stress that our main effort should always be concentrated on wanting. Wanting to do, even if you don't accomplish. As the Chafetz Chaim of blessed memories used to say, medaf ton, medaf nish of ton. All you're being asked to do is to do, not to accomplish. Accomplish a lot? That depends on God. If He will give you the opportunities to accomplish a lot. How do you know how much you will accomplish? You don't. So you have to just do. No, I got to accomplish. Well, if all you're going to think all day is about doing a lot, you may not do anything. You just do. Whether you get ahead a lot, whether you do one or you do two, that does not depend on you, how much you will end up doing. But you got to do something. So that is why the rabbis tell us, focus on wanting to do something. Focus on the desire, on the interest of doing the right thing. How much of it you will accomplish in the end does not depend on you, but at least you had the desire. That's what matters. And why does that matter? You know why that matters so much? Because we have a very, very famous saying that the rabbis tell us, that those who really strive to do the right thing, those who truly strive to do the right thing, who want to be pure and want to come close to God, they will receive divine assistance. If you want to make $1 million, who's to say you're going to get help from above? Maybe that's not part of your destiny, your luck. Maybe the $1 million will ruin your life. So God is not necessarily going to give you something that's going to ruin your life. But if it's something spiritual and you ask for spiritual matters, God, help me concentrate on my prayer a little bit more. I'm so distracted. My business is in my head when I'm praying. I can't get it out of my head. That's a spiritual request. We get assistance for that. When we make a spiritual request, God, please help me with my marriage. That's a spiritual request. You want peace. Help me raise my kids. Direct me to place them in the best schools. Give me the strength to have patience for them. These are spiritual requests. For spiritual requests, we have divine assistance. They will help us from above. And the greatest proof for that is that many individuals who were so far removed from religion have come back, have done teshuvah. That's the greatest proof that even though they were so far removed, so distant, totally removed, nonetheless, they mustered up the courage to come back. And they had a big fight and struggle with their friends, with their family members, to overcome and to make those changes. But in order to win, they had to receive divine assistance, and they did, apparently, because they won. Some people tried and they fell behind. Why? Because they didn't try enough. Even if you don't succeed the first day, try and try again. Never give up hope. Because of this very famous piece of advice that the rabbis tell us. If you really want to get closer to God, you really want to do the right thing, you pray to Him and you continuously try, you will see that God will help you in the end. Amen.